Hello! Welcome to English for Shared. Here, you learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's go!
The peace between Israel and Hamas. It was a tense silence in the air. The world, weary of headlines of destruction, watched the Middle East with hesitant eyes, like someone staring at a minefield at dusk. Gaza, once vibrant and full of life, had become a labyrinth of ruins and shadows. The sound of planes overhead and nighttime explosions was now part of the daily routine for families who lived between tenuous hope and constant fear. Israel, for its part, bore deep wounds, hostages still in enemy hands, cities under threat, a people divided between the demand for security and the desire for peace. It was a scene of collective exhaustion, as if an entire region were on the brink of a historic collapse. It was in this context that an unexpected figure re-emerged on the global stage, Donald Trump. After years away from power, he returned to the spotlight with a bold promise to unite mortal enemies around a peace agreement. His often controversial methods divided opinion, but his ability to surprise was undeniable. While traditional leaders hesitated, Trump leaped forward like a gambler betting all his chips on a single move, an ambitious plan to stop the spiraling violence between Israel and Hamas. The negotiations took place away from the cameras, in discreet rooms illuminated by cold lights and surrounded by silence. Egyptian diplomats, Qatari envoys, and Turkish mediators moved like chess pieces, trying to align conflicting interests. On one side, Israeli leaders demanded safety and the return of the hostages. On the other, Hamas representatives defended territory, political survival, and national pride. The talks were intense, full of veiled threats, unexpected concessions, and moments of pure tension. Few believed that anything lasting would emerge from them. But then the unthinkable happened. In early October 2025, Trump appeared before the cameras and, in his characteristic style, announced that Israel and Hamas had accepted the first phase of a historic peace agreement. It was as if, for a brief moment, the gears of war had stopped. The ceasefire was in place. The hostages would be freed. Troops would begin to retreat, and humanitarian aid would find its way. In that moment, the world watched, not with naivete, but with a rare kind of hope, the hope that arises when history seems to change its course.
For years, the conflict between Israel and Hamas seemed like an unhealable wound. Temporary truces came and went, agreements were signed and broken, and each offensive left a greater trail of destruction and mistrust. It was on this minefield that Donald Trump reappeared on the international scene, no longer as President of the United States, but as the mediator of a plan few dared believe in. In September 2025, he called on strategic allies and presented an ambitious outline, a peace plan divided into phases designed to interrupt the cycle of violence and pave the way for a political reconstruction of the Gaza Strip. The proposal involved an immediate ceasefire, the release of Israeli hostages, a gradual troop withdrawal, the entry of humanitarian aid, and international oversight mechanisms. At the same time, it pressured Hamas to accept unprecedented conditions, including negotiations on partial disarmament, always a hot-button issue. The plan was met with disbelief in many diplomatic circles, but Trump persisted. With the support of Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, an intense round of discreet negotiations began. Each meeting was a battle of nerves. Every comma in the document was a battleground. Israel entered the talks cautiously, determined to ensure security and justice for the victims of previous attacks. Hamas, for its part, sought to preserve its political position and ease the siege on Gaza. Between the two, Arab and American mediators crafted agreements with the precision of surgeons. Gradually, the hardliners began to give way to compromises, not out of trust, but out of exhaustion and political calculation. The war had taken its toll. The leaders knew that continuing meant heading toward an even deeper abyss. By the end of that month, a final draft was ready. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even complete. But it was a beginning. And in long conflicts, beginnings have an almost prophetic weight. For the first time in years, Israel and Hamas had agreed to sit down, albeit indirectly, on the same terms. On October 8, 2025, the words that many thought impossible echoed around the world. Israel and Hamas had agreed to implement the first phase of the peace plan mediated by Donald Trump. The scene was broadcast to millions. Trump, in front of microphones, flanked by aides and diplomats, announcing an immediate ceasefire and practical, impactful measures. These weren't just vague promises. There were clear dates, actions, and commitments. This first phase envisaged the release of all living Israeli hostages, a return of the bodies of those who had been killed, and a partial military withdrawal of Israel to previously agreed lines. In return, Hamas would agree to allow a massive influx of humanitarian aid in Gaza, overseen by international organizations, and would halt its attacks. It was a tactical and humanitarian agreement that avoided immediate discussion of the most explosive issues, such as full demilitarization or the future governance of Gaza, to prioritize urgent actions that could save lives. Behind the scenes, the signing of the agreement was the result of complex diplomatic engineering. Egypt acted as a bridge to Hamas, Qatar pressed for humanitarian concessions, and Turkey acted as a side channel for sensitive issues. The United States, through Trump, centralized the message: either we move forward together or we sink deeper. The phrase ran through diplomatic corridors like a mantra. Even the most skeptical leaders admitted there was a turning point here. International reactions were immediate. European capitals celebrated the measure as a historic step. The UN highlighted the importance of the agreement and announced the dispatch of teams to monitor its implementation. Hostage families wept in relief in front of the cameras. In Gaza, thousands awaited the arrival of the first aid trucks. The moment was solemn. A new chapter, still uncertain, had begun.
No peace agreement is born in isolation. As soon as the announcement was made, reactions crossed borders and languages, reflecting the historic weight of the decision. Global leaders, from Washington to Brussels, from Cairo to Doha, expressed support and caution. Many saw the initiative as a potential turning point, a rare moment when politics breaks with the logic of war. Others, however, noted that agreements between Israel and Hamas are fragile, like castles built on sand. In Israel, society was divided between emotion and distrust. For the hostages' families, the agreement was a belated miracle. For more conservative sectors, it was a dangerous concession. Military officials questioned how to ensure Hamas would comply with the terms without complete disarmament. Meanwhile, in Gaza, crowds awaited humanitarian convoys with mixed looks, hope for relief and fear of yet another broken promise. Many civilians, scarred by profound losses, saw the ceasefire as a necessary pause, not an end. The international media immersed itself in the issue, describing the agreement as the most significant breakthrough since Oslo, or a risky gamble with historic potential. Political analysts highlighted that Trump's presence, with his unpredictable and direct style, had destabilized traditional dynamics and forced progress where others had failed. Critics, on the other hand, warned of the lack of a clear plan for the second phase, the most difficult: Gaza governance and demilitarization. Still, the prevailing sentiment was a rare collective breath. After months of blood, smoke, and ruins, the idea of silence, even if temporary, seemed almost miraculous. The agreement didn't erase the past, but it lit a flame for the future. With the ceasefire in effect, the world's attention turned to the real test, the implementation. Troops began repositioning, humanitarian convoys crossed borders, and international teams were deployed to monitor every step. It was a precisely choreographed movement. Any slip-up could reignite the flames of war. Distrust between the parties remained high. Every gesture was watched, every word measured. The greatest challenge loomed on the horizon: the political and military future of Gaza. The issue of Hamas's demilitarization loomed large over the entire process. Israel demanded solid guarantees. Hamas refused to completely surrender its weapons. Mediators worked to devise compromises, international supervision, gradual dismantling, integration of local forces, but nothing was finalized. It was clear that peace was still on thin ice. The international community,
aware of the fragility of the situation, sought to consolidate practical advances before facing the more explosive discussions. The next phases would require diplomatic patience, political creativity, and courage. The success or failure of this agreement would have repercussions far beyond Gaza. It would influence regional alliances, Israeli domestic policies, and even global geopolitics. In this climate of anticipation, peace seemed like a thin line drawn in the desert, visible, fragile, but real. For a moment, the guns had fallen silent, and that, in itself, was a historic feat.
Conclusion. The peace agreement brokered by Donald Trump between Israel and Hamas is not just another diplomatic document. It represents a unique landmark in the long and painful history of the Middle East, the moment when mortal enemies decided, albeit with reservations, to pause for breath. The release of hostages, the opening of humanitarian corridors, and the ceasefire didn't resolve all the issues, but they did open an unprecedented breach. Like any historic milestone, it carries both promise and risk. Its future will depend on the courage of leaders, international vigilance, and, above all, the will of the directly affected populations. If sustained, it could usher in a new political phase for Gaza and redefine the course of Israeli security. If it fails, it will leave an even deeper wound. History will judge this moment not by the words spoken on the platforms, but by the actions that follow in the fields, in the streets, and in the negotiating rooms. For now, the world watches. The silence of the guns is fragile, but also precious. And maybe, just maybe, this is the first step toward a change that seemed impossible.